I'd be glad to provide explanations for each line of the code you provided. Import statements. From Flask import Flask, render underscore template, request, redirect, URL underscore for, imports necessary modules from the Flask framework for creating web applications. From Flask underscore Sklalchemy import SQL Alchemy, imports the SQL Alchemy module for interacting with databases. Flask app creation. App equals Flask, name, creates a Flask application instance. The name argument is used to specify the name of the current module, which is important for configuration. Database configuration. App. Config. SQLALCHEMY underscore database underscore URI equals, sets the database URI to connect to a SQLite database named users. DB. This database will be created if it doesn't exist. Database initialization. DB equals SQL Alchemy, app, initializes the SQL Alchemy database instance using the created Flask application. User model definition. Class user, DB, model, defines a user class that represents a user in the database. This class inherits from the DB, model class, which provides methods for interacting with the database. Id equals DB, column, DB, integer, primary underscore key equals true, defines an id column of type integer that acts as the primary key for the user table. This column automatically generates unique integer values for each user. Username equals DB, column, DB, string, 80, unique equals true, nullable equals false, defines a username column of type string with a maximum length of 80 characters. This column is marked as unique, ensuring that each username is unique in the database. It is also marked as nullable equals false, indicating that it cannot be empty. Email equals DB, column, DB, string, 120, unique equals true, nullable equals false, defines an email column with similar properties to the username column, ensuring unique email addresses. Password equals DB, column, DB, string, 120, nullable equals false, defines a password column for storing hashed user passwords. Registration route. At app.route, register, methods equals, GET, post, defines a route for the register URL that handles both GET and POST requests. If request, method equals post, checks if the request method is a POST request, indicating that a user is submitting the registration form. Username equals request, form, username, email equals request, form, email, password equals request, form, password, extracts the username, email, and password values from the submitted form data. User equals user, username equals username, email equals email, password equals password, creates a new user instance with the extracted values. DB, session link to .add, user, adds the new user instance to the database session. DB, session, commit, commits the changes to the database, saving the new user record. Return redirect, URL underscore for, login, redirects the user to the login route after successful registration. Return render underscore template, register, HTML, renders the register, HTML template if the request is a GET request, displaying the registration form. Login route. At app.route, login, methods equals, GET, post, defines a route for the login URL that handles both GET and POST requests. If request, method equals post, checks if the request method is a POST request, indicating that a user is submitting the login form. Username equals request, form, username, password equals request, form, password, extracts the username and password values from the submitted form data. User equals user, query, filter underscore by, username equals username, first, queries the database for a user with the specified username. If user and check underscore password underscore hash, user, password, checks if a user was found and if the provided password matches the stored hashed password. The check underscore password underscore hash function is assumed to be implemented for password verification. Hash login user. If the login is successful, you would typically implement logic to log in the user, such as setting a session variable or creating an authentication token. Return redirect, URL underscore for home, redirects the user to the home page after successful login. Return render underscore template, login, HTML, error equals, invalid username or password, renders the login. HTML template with an error message if the login fails due to invalid credentials. Return render underscore template, login. HTML, renders the login. HTML template if the request is a GET request, displaying the login form. Remember that this code provides